with an introduction to the topic. And then I'll be introducing each of you, and then we'll begin with one question, which will be common for everyone. And then we'll be taking counter questions after that.
And that is regarding hunger. The
That's
theme.
right. Yes, ma'am. Everything would be regarding hunger. Yes.
Sure. Thanks. And counter questions are from within the debate, or audience can also ask?
Within the debate, audience, in fact, we are live right now, so audience will be listening to every comment that you make, and they will be asking questions. We'll put the questions in the chat box, and I'll be taking them up.
Sure.
Yeah. I think we're good to begin, Yajur. Okay, yes, we are. Hello and welcome. You're watching The Argumentative Indian. I am Shweta Kothari. Even as India slowly prepares itself to recover from the blow of COVID-19 pandemic, another crisis is looming large, and that is India's hunger problem. Despite warehouses overflowing with grains, photos that we've seen ourselves, and obviously the footage of which has come out in open through various media sources, achieving agriculture self-sufficiency and putting a wide public distribution system in place, the harsh reality is that roughly 20 crore Indians at the moment sleep in hunger each night, and 19 crore Indians are suffering from chronic undernourishment. Now, various indices have come out in the recent past, perhaps putting into context where India's hunger stands, and also questioning India's preparedness as far as hunger is concerned. We have a brilliant panel joining us today to talk on this very important issue, starting with Dr. Pulpapure Balakrishnan. He's an economist, an educationist, and also an author. Thank you, Dr. Balakrishnan, for joining us this lovely evening. Snigdha Sehel is joining us. She's the CEO of Action Against Hunger in India. Thank you, Snigdha, for taking time out. Dr. Neena Bhatia, who's the Joint Advisor, WCD Vertical of Niti Aayog, and Associate Professor at Lady Irwin College, is also joining us. Dr. Bhatia, thank you for taking time out. And finally, Dr. Deepak Pental. He's the former professor of University of Delhi. He's also the former Vice Chancellor for genetic manipulation of crop plants. Dr. Pental, thank you. And thank you to all the panelists who have taken time out to join us on this evening on a very important issue, something that Indians have been talking about for a while. Let me first begin by addressing the elephant in the room, and that is the fact that India has been trailing on Global Hunger Index, something that everybody's been talking about. In fact, government so far has also came out and said, we do not really believe in the gaps in the methodology, because there are gaps in the methodology. There could be biases because these are international organizations and may not have a proper perspective on where India stands today. I want to start by asking you, Snigdha, what is your opinion of where we are as far as hunger in the country is concerned? Do you think we have come a long way? And are you of the belief that the Global Hunger Index perhaps is not appropriately representational of India's progress?
Thank you, Shweta, for that question. And thank you for having me on this amazing panel and this debate. And also thank you for really getting the biggest one out already. Let me start by saying that the Global Hunger Index, even if you do not, even if you do not go into the, even if you don't nitpick and don't split it, the fact that we are, it doesn't matter if we've slipped a few points, but the fact that we any which ways are in the bottom few countries is itself, an indicator of how serious the situation is. When I was looking at it, I continued to think that, if it's not 106, but it is 96, but it is 100, it is 108, how does that matter? It is worse. We are in the worst countries, right? So first of all, my answer is that, yes, we are making progress, but the progress is slow. There is a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of efforts that need to be pooled. This is an indicator. The NHFS 5 came out that also showed similar results. In fact, in the Global Hunger Index, if you look at it, you see that India has a 17.5% wasting score, which is the highest amongst all the countries. Now, whether your ranking is A, B, or C, but that kind of a score is a very serious indicator of where we are. If our own internal systems and surveys like NHFS 5 are talking about how the stunting has grown, how the wasting has grown over the years, that also are an indicator. So are we in a situation where we think it is a situation of crisis? Do we think that it is something that we need to really gear up and battle? The answer, according to me, is yes. So I would not really comment on whether the methodology was right or not. I would say that what is it that is being called for, and the called for thing is that we need to act. It really doesn't matter about the methodology. What matters is that we are not in a best of our shape. We can do better. We have to do better.
Dr. Pulapre, do you agree with Snigdha there that we have to do better? Perhaps we are not there just as yet, and the index perhaps may or may not be an appropriate representation of where the country is, but we are not doing good enough.
I agree totally. Actually, it's very easy for me to agree on both counts. We do have a problem with access to food, and let me tell you, for a significant section of the population. And I deliberately use the word access to food because I have a bit of a problem with the Global Hunger Index, not where India has been ranked, but the index itself is a little problematic because it brings together, components which are not really commensurate. While individually stunting, wasting, and undernourishment, which is the term that I prefer to use, all of them make sense. And it's entirely believable that India doesn't do well at all on any of these indicators. I just want to say, though, all of this has been known for quite a long time. And it's kind of interesting that this got particular attention when the ranking on the Global Hunger Index was made public. But a large number of significant sections of the population does not have access to food, have problems accessing food, has been known for a very long time. So I agree completely. We have a problem on our hands, and it may have got a little worse. And I just want to conclude by saying, unless I have very much more time, I just want to say that you don't really need to rely on the Global Hunger Index for this. You already have individual data on the individual components, but India has for a long time had a official measure of poverty. And the poverty index in India is based on whether you have enough income to satisfy your calorie requirement. And it's found that the most recent survey, which itself, unfortunately, is about a decade old, it's 2011-12, and it's really an indictment of the government that it hasn't got a more recent official survey of poverty or estimate of poverty in India. The 2011-12 figures show about 27% poverty in India. So there is clearly a problem of access to food for a significant part of the population. And I want to conclude by saying it may have got a little worse. And I again want to give you a statistic, if I may. The unemployment rate by official statistics, this comes from a report called the Periodic Labor Force Survey put out by the National Statistical Service, an associate organization. And that shows unemployment having shot up from about 6 to 20, hold your breath, 20% over 1920, 2021, which was the period of the epidemic in India. So yes, there clearly is hunger, there clearly is problem with access to food, and we need to worry about it, and it may have got a little worse of late.
Dr. Balakrishnan, one thing perhaps I would like to contest, and I can take that question from Dr. Nina at this point in time, is that you may not agree with the index per se, but it has brought light to the larger question of hunger in the country. At least people are talking about it. And that's where I think it's important that even if there was a gap in methodology, or even if you think the foreign forces are at play, if there's a larger conspiracy against India, as many would say, I still think, Dr. Neena, and I would like you to come in here, that the index at least brought to light the larger question of hunger in the country, and that it is a problem and it continues to be a problem. Do you agree with that?
Partly, but let me first clarify that the Global Hunger Index is a misnomer. I am not going to question the methodology, but I am going to question what it, measures itself. Because if we talk about hunger, it is, not, defined as something where we are not able to meet or have access to enough food to be able to, satisfy our, our basic needs in terms of calories and in terms of, nutrition. And at the same time, it is, and it is due to economic or reasons. However, this index, which is comprised of 3 domains, it has undernourishment, it is very important to understand. I mean, we can discuss at length about the problems that we face and the actions we need to take. There is no denying on, certain facts which are there. But the larger question is, does this index measure what it is supposed to measure? It is supposed to measure hunger. And out of the 3 domains that it measures, one is undernourishment. One is about nutrition, which has 2 components, stunting and wasting. And the third one is on child mortality. And stunting and wasting together make up 1/3 of the weightage of the index, while mortality, under 5 mortality, makes up another 1/3, and undernourishment is 1/3 of the index. Now, first of all, the choice of these indicators itself does not represent hunger. If we talk about child, first of all, it does not, there's many, actually on many counts, it is, faulty, because we are talking about undernourishment as a country, while 3 indicators, stunting, wasting, and under 5 mortality, talk only about children below 5 years. So there is a multiple count of children under 5 years. There is overweightage given to them. They constitute only 1/6 of India's population, but 66% of the weightage is given to these indicators, while only 1/3 is given to prevalence of undernutrition. And under 5 mortality, all experts would agree, large component, about more than around 65% component of it is because of neonatal mortality, which takes place within first 1 month of the birth of the child. And that definitely is not due to hunger. It is due to infections. It could be because of certain kinds of, sepsis and lack of delivery care, etc., and definitely not because of hunger. If we talk about stunting and wasting, though they represent status of nutrition, but being it is not 100% dependent on the food we eat. And nutrition is a complex outcome of the food we eat, the requirements, the the sanitation, the infection rates, the maternal education, maternal empowerment, various factors. Of course, we are not denying that food is one of the components, but again, it does not measure, it is not the only outcome, only determinant of stunting and wasting. So 66% of the Global Hunger Index indicators are not necessarily an outcome of hunger. So the very name, so it could be called something else if we talk about nutrition or something, or mortality, or whatever these combination of indicators represent. But to say that the moment you use the word hunger, it looks as if people are not having food, and it brings a very negative image, which is not what it is. There could be pockets where there is access to food is a problem, but we also know that there are many measures, which have been taken by the government. I am not going to close my eyes to any of the problems, but at the same time, I am not going to also accept, what is not, that it is a misnomer. It is not giving appropriate weightage to the overall nutrition. It is giving overemphasis on child's nutrition. It is measuring the same outcomes many times. and the outcomes that it is measuring, food is only a very small contributor for more than 66% of this. And we will talk about the remaining 1/3 also, and there are serious issues in that aspect as well. So to that extent, I would say that these are just two NGOs not placed in India. So we should talk about nutrition. We should talk about how we should best take care of our populations, but we should not be over, alarmed by somebody who is trying to show us only certain kind of a picture, I would say.
Okay, I think the panelists will have a lot of questions to that. I have a lot of questions to ask you, but we'll move to Dr. Deepak Pental at this point in time. Dr. Pental, from the point of view of genetics and crops availability in the country, I want to understand from you, how prepared are we to mitigate the hunger crisis that there is? Do you first agree that there's a hunger crisis? If yes, how prepared do you think we are?
You see, all this panelists have made some very interesting observations. I agree that when these kind of surveys come, we sort of wake up and there's a discussion. Like every year when the university rankings come up, we try to discuss, what is happening to our higher education and where it is and so on. So as these surveys give us a nudge to discuss these important issues, I don't mind these surveys at all. And as Snigdha pointed out, why fuss about 92 to 100? It is clear that we are in the lower rankings, whatever the number may be. It will depend upon tweaking of the factors that you take into consideration and all that. And Dr. Balakrishnan made a very interesting point that 24% people are below poverty. And I won't be surprised, correlations are a bad idea, but 24% are undernourished, which shows that the real cause of undernourishment in the country is lack of purchasing power. So if people have money in their pocket, they may buy some junk food also, but they will buy a lot of good food also. So it's a crisis of lack of purchasing power, and we are not able to get out of the poverty trap for a very large population of the country. That's the way I see it. I am neither a nutritionist or an economist, so I may be wrong there, but from whatever I feel about the issue, this poverty relates very easily and very directly with lack of purchasing power, and that means undernourishment or hunger, even hunger at times. Now, the area of genetics, you see, we have been able to feed the growing population of the world, which jumped from 1.6 billion in 1900 to around 9.6 billion today. Please correct me if I'm wrong with the figure, which is today's figure. But it is only through technology that we have been able to feed so many people. And the future lies in intensification, which is sustainable. Otherwise, we will be facing hunger. We have shortage of edible oils. We have surplus of rice and wheat. There are distortions in our agriculture system. The farmers are agitating because if they get out of wheat and rice, the other crops don't yield enough. So their incomes will drop, or the government will have to pay such huge subsidies that we will impoverish the country as a whole. So the productivity must increase, and the productivity increase will only come through technologies. So if you ask me, I am a great believer in the power of technology. Things can go wrong also, but the modern world is all about science and technology and how we use it. You can look around and you will see the impact of science and technology on everything that we wear, everything we eat, everything we do. This may be my bias, but I am all for moving forward and innovating. And of course, the biggest innovation political leaders have to do in this country is how to get people out of this poverty trap of 24%. And I think the nutritional problems will be resolved automatically. But till then, we have to do something for these undernourished people, because they are our country's citizens and we owe them a responsibility.
Thank you, Dr. Pentel. Snigdha, I want to come to you and with a very important, in fact, statement that Dr. Neena made, and she said, food is not the only factor that results in stunting and wasting. In fact, it's a small contributor. As a person who runs a company that only looks at hunger and perhaps catering to the needs of the people in this country, poorest of poor, I want to know from you, how glaring is the problem at this point in time? How much progress have we made? Does this figure make it look like India has a problem? Well, it does not at this moment, or do you think there is some truth to what we are hearing from foreign organizations, albeit, but there is some truth to what we are hearing at the moment?
First of all, let me say that Dr. Neena, you made some very interesting remarks. I think it's very true that if you look at it from only a perspective, and you say, oh, hunger means a lack of food, it is really a very, very, very narrow perspective, which can be a perception created. So yes, Dr. Neena, I agree, it could appear to someone who doesn't understand the nuances that, oh, people have no food, and I agree that food is only a small part of the hunger problem. But all the players and all the people who understand this, who understand the problem, also understand that hunger does not mean lack of food. It means multiple levels of deficiency of micronutrients. It means that we do not have the requisite nutrition coming in for us to be healthy, for children and for people to be healthy, well-developed, and have the right mental faculties. So there is the definition of hunger, or the meaning of hunger within our sector is not whether I got to eat and filled my stomach. The meaning of hunger is often not interchangeable, but often includes malnutrition. So, and which, yes, it does have a lot of levers playing. There are so many underlying causes. And that is why, which also brings me to the point that if the underlying causes like poverty, as Dr. Balakrishnan was mentioning, or as, gender disparity, which, I strongly believe is a huge player, education, so many things, if all of these are at play, and still our numbers are like that, then imagine how strong the problem is. So to me, the more factors you add in, the more complex the problem becomes, and not. And I can't say that, oh, just because everyone got some little rice with salt to eat, that has resolved a hunger problem. So in a way, what Dr. Neena is saying is right, that it is just not about food. But the moment we all agree that it isn't about only food, it means that it is a severely complicated and complex issue and needs many more brains, many more hands joined together, many more types of innovative ideas to resolve it. It is in no way something that is not true, as Shweta, you were saying, or is lesser than is shown. No, it is very severe. The problem exists. The problem is more complicated than probably some people may make of it. So that would be my comment to this. I hope I've answered, Shweta, your question.
Yes, yes, Snigdha, you have. I want to come to Dr. Bhatia first before I go to Dr. Balakrishnan. Dr. Bhatia, you talked about various government schemes and the fact that you don't want to overlook what the government has done. So we have an efficient public distribution scheme, as many would say. We have the ICDS, we have Poshan Abhiyan, and so many such schemes that the government has launched year after year, followed up, and has been spoken about massively in the media, has been scrutinized widely by economists, nutritionists. I want to know from you, as someone who is a part of a government institution, an advisor to Niti Aayog, where do you think the structural deficiencies are? Where is it that we're lagging, and where is it that we need to pull the plug in order to ensure an effective delivery of such schemes?
Yeah. So sorry, I was just unmuting. Yes, we have an efficient public distribution system. We have ICDS, midday meal programs. We have many other schemes, and even during COVID time, Pradhan Mantri Kalyan Yojana and various other schemes were, there. And yes, I do agree. I would say, I agree with what most of Snigdha would say, has said, but there are just two small nuances that I would like to, point out. Hunger, by definition, because we have an SDG target of, zero hunger, and there is a monitoring mechanism. And the way, so we are not talking, it is just the salt or, rice or something, but the by very definition of it is that people who do not have access to a certain number of calories, which are considered to be minimum, which are required. Now, there are two or three things before I come to the government schemes and the things. One is that, this particular, index, the rank, of course, is anyway not comparable from year to year, and also does not necessarily, it is the score that even the people who have devised this rank talk about. And even the score that I said is made up of not only prevalence of undernourishment, which is the only 1/3 component of the entire thing, which according to FAO measures hunger. And on that, our value has been not the worst in the whole world and not as bad. Like I'm saying, there again, we cannot deny, according to FAO, this value is somewhere around 15%, the methodology that they have used and which ministry has already questioned. But now, so my comment would be that, yes, there is problem of nourishment, in terms of, but we should not call it hunger, because hunger and nutrition are slightly different. They are not, of course, being hunger free may not mean completely healthy and well nourished, but being malnourished does not mean having no access to food. So that is the slight distinction I would like to draw on. And secondly, we have all these schemes, and the 66% of this component, which is talking about children under 5, they are the ones which are very small, and they really need a lot of attention. Feeding small babies, taking care of small babies, low birth weight babies, taking care of, mothers, education, empowerment, various factors would contribute to this complex issue of, tackling malnutrition. So our schemes are in place, our mechanisms are in place, but somehow the feeding, there is government can do only so much. Feeding a small baby, requires time, it requires certain kind of actions. And unfortunately, the wasting that we are talking about, which is little on a high, which we are around 17%, it is dependent a lot on how much we can, feed the babies, because it's acute malnutrition. So if they get diarrhea, if they get anything, their weight is going to fall. And how much we can provide sanitation, wash, and now nutrition is no longer the schemes of the government no longer are only restricted to distribution of food, but with Poshan Abhiyan coming in, we are already going beyond, I would say, just the food, but we are tackling health. We are bringing together various ministries, we are talking about WASH, we are talking about sanitation, we are talking about empowerment and education, building infrastructure. But yes, I feel still our 0 to 3 years age group somehow, in our program, because they cannot come to the works, I mean the program ICDS or Anganwadi structures. So our outreach to those and education of mother and counseling of mother is what would require a lot of emphasis and participation of families and communities in taking care of these small babies would be a very critical component if we have to take care of problem of malnutrition, which is very high in the smaller children.
Dr. Bharti, just one clarification for the layman. You said undernourishment does not necessarily means unavailability of food. What other factors could result in undernourishment then?
So undernourishment could be, like I said, diarrhea, respiratory tract infections. It could be because the feeding is not adequate, or is
those would be the exceptions, ma'am, or would that be?
No. They are not the exceptions. A large proportion of wasting is because every time a child undergoes a severe bout of infection or any such illness, that is the time when the weight is likely to drastically drop, and we will be able to see the wasting is according to the height, the weight is appropriate or not. So in simple term, dubla, ज्यादा दुबला बच्चा, because उसकी height के हिसाब से वो दुबला है. और our Indian children in general are little on the, I mean, our distribution is little on the left side of the graph, and so it is not even perceived, I would say, as a population, as a problem by mother. Because if I have children in the community who are all little thin, then that is what to the eyes of the mother looks like a norm. It's also because they are not able to perceive that many times unless the problem becomes severe and the child is really unwell and needs maybe certain kind of medical intervention. But many times, because of these underlying infections, lack of sanitation or not appropriate feeding, because to the babies, breastfeeding is not done, and breast milk substitutes are given which are over diluted or not hygienic. So a lot of various other factors, any nutritionist you would talk to will be able to explain, and anybody who has worked in the communities would be able to identify with this, and these are all going to contribute to undernourishment. So when we need in urban areas, we would need a lot of support system for mothers who are working as housemaids and things, and have to leave children in the care of maybe elder sibling or not properly attended to. So there are various other aspects that we need to kind of also look at, so that's why I would say hunger is not equal to nourishment. Of course, we need to take care of wasting or whatever problems that are there, but then we should not confuse the two, and we should address with the right approach, whatever the problems are.
Okay, I'll come to Dr. Pulapure at this point in time. Doctor, I want to give you certain figures, and these figures are important because some of these have been released by the government of India. In 2016, it was estimated that nearly 92,000 crore was lost annually in farm produce wastage. Nearly 20 crore people sleep hungry. As I mentioned earlier, 40% of the food that we produce annually goes to waste. These are some very glaring figures. What do you make of these figures? And do you think India is on track to achieving zero hunger by the deadline that it has set up for itself, 2030? Or rather, the United Nations has set up the 2030 deadline.
Right. Let me just say that unless there is going to be a very major change in policies, I don't see the problem of access to food for a significant section of the population, not, of course, the entire population, going away. So, yeah, I mean, we have a serious problem, and I really believe the only long-term solution is actually to generate employment and to generate income so people have access to food, which includes, of course, healthy and nourishing food, not just food of any kind. And yeah, so on track, I'm not sure we are on track, to be very clear. And the problem of course, this is pandemic related. But the problem of poverty is almost certainly got exacerbated during the pandemic. That, of course, is a global phenomenon, but may have been more so in India because one aspect of the government's response has been inadequate, which is there has not been a macroeconomic stimulus or of adequate measure in relation to the problem. But yes, for about 8 months, I think the government did distribute food grains quite substantially to the population. And yeah, so I just want to conclude by saying that PDS is necessary, but PDS is not by itself sufficient. You know, you need to have developed abilities in the population that they can earn incomes and also manage the economy in such a way that it will generate employment. So, and incomes, and therefore the problem of access to food is taken care of. I just want to say something, if I may, Shweta, which you brought up earlier. I repeat that I don't really need to rely on the information that comes in the Global Hunger Index, published some months ago, to take the view that we have a problem with access to food in India. But I'd also like to say this for my seniors in the profession. This has been recognized in India for decades. Amartya Sen has probably used the term hunger at least 3 decades ago. I'm almost certain. So I'm just trying to say that the problem of hunger has been recognized. Whether governments are doing enough is a separate issue. And I just want to conclude by also saying that we shouldn't be overly focused on the central government, whichever party is in power. There's a huge role here for state governments, and the variation in poverty across India is quite considerable. Therefore, the problem of access to food in India varies from state to state.
Dr. Balakrishnan, 2 things that I want to ask you. First, you talked about COVID and how that has set us back. Could you perhaps tell us by what percent has India, if you cannot give us a percentage, perhaps give us some, maybe macroeconomic data on which parameter India has not done very well as compared to other countries? Because, one of the things that a lot of naysayers continue to say at this point in time is that, look, every country has performed badly. There has been a global degradation. You can't say India is the only country at the receiving end, or Indian government is the only government that hasn't done enough. Major economies, developing economies, have taken a hit. So how do you measure India's performance as compared to other economies? That's one. And secondly, when you say that hunger has been recognized as a phenomena, I personally disagree, because the moment government comes out and says, look, this data doesn't seem fair, look, there is a problem with their methodology, look, they're not, perhaps agreeing with how much we have grown, that there's an ideological difference, that they are going after the government, and in this case, this particular ruling party, I think they're denying that there is a problem, and therefore not just denying the survey or the ranking per se, but also denying the very problem of hunger.
Right. Let me start with your last point first. Let me just tell you or make it very clear that as an economist, my reference point is not the government of the day. Whether it is a government at the center, or I live in Kerala at the moment when I'm not in Ashoka, the government in Kerala. I'm an independent economist. And the point of hunger having been recognized, and I gave you the name, Amartya Sen has been writing about it at least for 3 decades. So within the profession and in India in general, the problem of access to food has been recognized. Yes, you're right, the government is denying this. I'm not a spokesman for the government, and I wouldn't waste too much time really contesting what they are saying, because as I said, the profession recognizes it to be a problem. But at the same time, I think you and your colleagues are probably doing a great job in contesting what the government is saying in response to Global Hunger Index. But I want to say again, I don't want to rely on the Global Hunger Index because it's technically problematic, and I don't feel very comfortable about that. To recognize the problem of access to food in India, that there is a problem of access to food in India, and that it may have got worse in the past a year and a half. And I repeat what I said earlier, indirectly, the poverty estimate is saying precisely that, because the poverty estimate in India is in terms of, do you have sufficient income to satisfy your calorie requirement? So indirectly, again, the problem is we recognized in India decades ago. Whether government has done enough is a different matter. And I just want to say, since you asked me this question about macroeconomic indicators, that's quite easy. Apart from Brazil, most countries have done better than India. The major countries, BRICS, the United States, and the United States have done better in terms of growth. They have contracted less. And the reason for that is very simple. At a macroeconomic level, they actually expanded public spending much, much more than the government of India did. And the final statistic that I want to give you, this is government data. It's available on the website of MOSPI, by the way, the Ministry of Statistics. The unemployment rate rose from 6 to 20% between 1920 and 2021. And that's a pretty good reason to believe that the problem of access to food has worsened in India in this period. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Snigdha, you were raising your hand.
Yeah. So a couple of things that I wanted to bring here, and responding to Dr. Neena, and also you, Shweta, you made a couple of points that I'd also like to respond to. So number one is when you say hunger, even within SDG. So what Dr. Neena is saying is absolutely correct, that when you're measuring hunger, there are many components. So you are measuring stunting, wasting, etc. And even if we keep aside the whole global hunger index and, imagine it never happened, if we look at only our own internal surveys, if we look at the NFHS, we know that the stunting numbers and the wasting numbers have come higher. We know that stunting means that there is chronic hunger problem. I would again say something else, that to add to what Dr. Neena was saying, and which is also countering what you were saying, Shweta, that I don't think so that there is a denial from the government. I think that there is quite a big acknowledgement. Poshan Abhiyan is a huge acknowledgement to say that, no, we do recognize that this is a problem. Poshan Abhiyan is I'm a fan of how Poshan Abhiyan, the whole program. We as an organization work a lot with the government. We work with the Anganwadis. We work at the field level. So we know the nuances, we know the problem. The program is great, which is nothing but an acknowledgement that yes, we agree there's a problem. Yes, we understand that it's a complex problem. It is not going to get resolved overnight. Partnerships, collaborations, everything is required. I think what needs to be done, or let me also not say what needs to be done. I think what needs to be understood is when we say hunger, we have to assume that we are talking about the subsets of hunger and not just access to food. That is number one. Number two is whether or not there is the intent from the government side. I think the intent is absolutely right. I don't think so there's a denial. Whether it is getting efficiently executed at 100% locations, definitely not. And that is the pain point. Is there a dearth of intellect? No. Is there a dearth of planning? No. Is there a dearth of actual execution? Yes. And which is why collaborations and partnerships become so key, right? Which is why, people like all of us sitting together have to come up with ideas that can actually help in execution. So my point would be to not get so sucked up into the conversation around whether people have food or not, but to actually have a conversation on, yes, I think all of us acknowledge that there is an issue in India. What ranking? Personally, I don't think so that ranking matters. We have an issue. We agree. It's very blatant, staring in our face. Post-COVID, it's just going to blow up in our faces furthermore. There is, the amount of issues that at a community level, when we work with the communities, we're seeing severe food insecurity, we are seeing income losses, we're seeing livelihoods completely gone. We are seeing women's mental and physical health deteriorating. Now, those are the things that we need to actually talk about. Rather than, I personally think not to get stuck so much on some GHI, which is an indicator, which is, as you said, Shweta, is a great thing that is actually making us talk about it. Anything that gets the conversation started. But I would say let's move on and talk about things that really make the subset. What are the subsets of hunger? But over to you, Shweta.
And in fact, we'll be talking about some larger solutions as well, and I'll be taking you all in to perhaps suggest what should be the way forward. But let me get Dr. Pentel at this point in time. Sir, as all the panelists have pointed out, that this is a layered problem. This is a multi-layered problem, one of which could be the nutritional value of the food. Would you say that the diversity of crops perhaps is not enough to meet the nutritional demand of the country? How do we confront the hidden hunger, that the panelists have been talking about? And also, I want to get your views on the food fortification by FSSAI, which has been a big initiative. And Indian context, how significant do you think food fortification will be as an initiative to counter undernourishment? So you're mute. You're muted.
If you take the nutritional side, definitely large number of our children are deficient in protein intake. We know of micronutrient deficiencies like iron deficiency. There have been surveys within the country which has shown that large number of women and even men are deficient in iron. So hunger actually doesn't mean famine-like conditions. Hunger probably today in the more sophisticated world means undernutrition and malnutrition. So as far as crop diversity is concerned, there are enough crops grown in India. What we require is mostly the PDS is about cereal grains, where we have, due to research intensity on rice and wheat, the yields are very high. The farmers want to grow only these crops. They only are seeking that there should be assured payment for that. But we cannot afford to have an excess of cereal grains and paucity of oil seeds and legume crops, which could meet the protein needs of predominantly vegetarian population. So, if you look at it, how we have met the protein deficiency to some extent, it is the poultry. If we take out the poultry industry, we will have huge issue of slippage in protein intake also. So we are not, for example, we are not using soy meal properly. That can be used, soy extrusion can be used to fortify wheat. I am all for fortification if it is done in a sensible manner. I don't think fortification, we in the middle class and upper middle class are consuming food which is fortified when we don't need it, but where it is needed. And let's not be against fortification. I think we should be for fortification as long as it is done sensibly and to a level that it doesn't start harming rather than helping. But what I feel is we should have, like we had Operation Flood to make ourselves sufficient in milk production and availability of milk in the country. I mean, we had such a bad situation in the 60s where, people were so short of even milk, even when they could afford it. I think we need to have like Operation Flood, Operation Nutrition, and all the components that are required, whether it is fortified food, whatever needs to be done, or industrial intervention, I think we should have an operation nutrition in the country, and that's the way to go.
Dr. Pendle, you were talking about the diversity of crops, and I would like you to comment on that. Perhaps expand for us which are the crops that India needs for meeting its nutritional value, and we're not growing enough. And if you could also tell us the reason why, apart from the fact that farmers do not think it's in their benefit to be growing certain crops.
See, if you leave out wheat and rice, most of our crops yield about one ton per hectare. Whether you take nutri cereals, the coarse grains are now called nutri cereals because they have better micronutrient composition in them. But if you move them from very highly drought prone areas where they are grown today into irrigation protected areas, they still have so many diseases and pests and pathogen problems, and we have not done enough research on these coarse grains to push up their productivity. So they don't yield high enough when they are grown in irrigated areas. And we require, for even our environment and for sustainability, crop diversification. You cannot be having wheat rice cycle and multiple rice crops in south where irrigation is available. So you need alternate crops, not only from nutritional point of view, but you need alternate crops for the proper agronomy and proper agriculture condition. Crop rotation is hardly being practiced in India, and that is the biggest threat to sustainability. So my point is that we need to raise the productivity levels of these crops, alternate crops, and then the farmers will happily grow them. And the deficit we have in edible oils and legume crops, fruit crops, vegetable crops, they will be covered. But a lot of times, as far as vegetable and fruit is concerned, it's a purchasing power problem. There is no reason why India cannot double or triple its vegetable production and fruit production. But where is the market and who will buy it, and whether the poor people can afford to buy it or not? So there are multiple reasons for this. But as far as crops are concerned, farmers' problems can be solved if we could raise the yield levels of these crops. And I think one lesson which we should learn from the COVID situation is how vulnerable living organisms are from pests and pathogens. A virus has shaken up the whole of humankind. And if you look at any crop, you will have a number of pests attacking them, number of fungal diseases. And I have been saying it throughout for the last couple of years that if you do not raise the productivity of your crops, alternative crops to wheat and rice, we will be in trouble from nutrition point of view, from agriculture diversity point of view, from every angle we will be in trouble.
Dr. Pendle, appreciate the fact that you brought in crop rotation, also farmers' issues, and the nutritional value of the crops that we're growing. Perhaps not enough rotation happening there. Again, a multi-layered debate, something that Argumentative Indian can further diverge into. But moving on for now, we have a question for you, Snigdha, from one of our viewers at this point in time, from Sanjay Kumar, and he asks, what % of hunger and malnutrition were they able to reduce in their implementation? I'm not sure if they, by they, Sanjay refers to the government, or if by they he refers to your company.
I'm assuming let's assume it's us.
Okay.
So let me give you an example. Again, the way we will measure our indicators would be on severely acute malnourished children, on what kind of cure rates do we have, on what kind of relapse rates do we have, etc. So on an average, let me say our cure rates have been over between 70 to 80%. I can also say that while we are in the process of measuring in some of the areas what kind of prevalence have we able to actually reduce, but in some places we've been actually able to make some kind of a dent, around between 3 to 5% of the prevalence has been reduced. Again, anemia is something that we measure, and we will realize that in the regions where we work, anemia has been successfully brought down from a severe anemia like 85 to 90% in pregnant women has actually been come down by 10% or so. And there are various indicators and there are various programs. I'm very happy if Sanjay, you can please reach out to me, and I'm happy to share more with you.
Thank you, Snigdha. Nina, I had a question from you from our last discussion, and we were talking about how perhaps children are also disposed to diarrhea and other factors which can result in wasting. In your opinion, is that a problem specific to India? Do you think it's specific to India because of lack of hygiene, perhaps, or access to hygiene-related products?
No, not necessarily. The world over, it is recognized that infections, are a cause of malnutrition and they contribute. But yes, in our case, actually, because there has been emphasis on, Swachh Bharat, wash and various things. So there is actually, now the awareness and the means and these are, being really addressed. These issues are really being addressed. At the same time, we also have now extended, not just the ORS treatment for diarrhea, but zinc supplementation during diarrhea as part of, again, home-based care and Poshan Abhiyan interventions. It was one of the priority interventions. And at the same time, we are now also having, vaccines against rotavirus, pneumococcal, so upper respiratory tract infections. So that's what I would like to say, that yes, I mean, there are, again, I mean, if we go into scientific debate, I'm not going to, that we can question Indians, by composition. We have higher percentage of body fat at a given weight, and that's why for Indian adults, we have very different norms for body mass index, which is a measure used to, measure obesity and all. So even in children, there are a lot of scientific debates that happen, whether these are truly the stunting rates or wasting rates or methodological. I'm not going to go into all those scientific discussions because it's a public this thing. But even if we were to address these issues, there is a lot of focus to bring these together. And India being such a, I mean, we should, it's a continent, it's a big country. And there are, if you look at our NFHS results also, if you look at only the, right now, only the state fact sheets for some, have been released. But in Niti Aayog, we are trying to look district by district by district, and we are finding actually there are remarkable examples, where we have reduced underweight by over 20% in certain districts. I'm not saying that is the norm, but there are shining examples from within our country, from where I think we need to learn the best practices. We need to adopt them. We need to kind of, build. I really agree that we need to build partnerships. It's we can achieve. Actually, you talked about achieving SDG targets. We may look quite far off from the targets, but we are a country, if we determine and if we all come together, actually we can achieve all the targets, that are set. We have shown in COVID through our vaccination program, and there are in HIV, even MDG, targets were there. So it is not actually anemia if we have proper iron intake, and it may look a very complex problem, but we need to make sure that we supply, we look at various causes. It is possible. These shining examples give us reassurance. And you would find every week we are coming. There are 28 districts out of 38 districts in Bihar showing improvement. There are 20 districts out of 30 in Karnataka showing improvement. So if we look at state average, there are states where we will say, if we look at their average, there is no reduction. And rather the situation has maybe worsened. But when we go into the details, we really need a granular approach. We really need to look at, bring partnerships together. We really need to look at and facilitate mother and ensure that mother can really, deliver the service. She can really take care of her own self and her child. And it is actually not just the mother, but it is also the family who comes together to take care of children. So if we determine, and if we I would say there is not that we do not have all the policies in place, but many times we tend to accept whatever is worst about us, and we are a little overcritical at times of our, and we are very accepting that yes, our situation, we should not be in a denial. But at the same time, we should also celebrate our successes. We should learn from good practices, and we should really work towards to bring together. That's why Honorable Prime Minister introduced this component of Jan Andolan, which actually tries to involve every single person into this program of, Poshan Abhiyan, because it is a collective responsibility as a society where governments, central or state, civil society, academia, and all the people and families, we all come together and take care of our children and our future. And yes, we will be, we should not doubt, we have to achieve these targets. That's the approach I think we should take.
Ma'am, two things. Firstly, have to achieve the targets. I completely agree with you that there is no other way out. Secondly,
and we have to work towards it and not say India hai, kuch nahi hoga, we will talk and all that.
It's good to be positive.
When we decide to do.
Yes, it's good to be positive. It's essential to be positive, but it's also important and imperative to be critical, because I don't think, as a journalist, I believe that it's by criticism that a democracy fares well. If we all stop criticizing, there'll be a sense of complacency that will set in.
Of course, that is important.
Yes. I'll come to Dr. Pulapre. Dr. Pulapre, we are looking to become a $5 trillion economy, right? And we're not faring very well as compared to even our South Asian neighbors, for that matter. I'm not going to talk about just particularly hunger index, because you don't quite agree with that, but there are other components as well. Public spending is not enough. You agreed yourself. What's the way forward? What should we do next?
I think I want to start by just a very small clarification. When I say that there is a problem with access to food, it is entirely consistent with hunger. I just say that I wouldn't necessarily go by the GHI, that's all. Now, I want to continue by saying that what we should focus clearly is on human development. And as part of that is whether people are free of, the poverty and ignorance and disease, and people are nourished, and people have access to food, access to education, and very importantly, I think women's empowerment, that's completely missing in the country. Frankly, even if you look at broad human development indicators in the country, they are best when there is some progress as far as women's empowerment is concerned in terms of education. Women's education is a very important part of human development in general, because mothers are responsible for bringing a child into the world and looking after them. If the women aren't empowered, then the next generation suffers. And anemia among pregnant women in India is very high. So naturally, you could expect that some part of malnourishment is passed on from mother to children. So there's a serious problem here, and we should focus on that. And I'm happy you brought up the $5 trillion economy. What's the word now? Aspiration. I personally think that looking at aggregates in terms of income will not really do anything as far as human development is concerned, including the elimination of hunger. So you would have to focus on human development, all aspects of it, education, health, which has a bearing on hunger again, and other aspects, drinking water, and I would say women's empowerment. I think there must be much more women in the political process. Our political parties don't give role for women. So why is that important? Because I think all these issues, including hunger, will get far more attention if women are in the political process. Women representatives in legislatures, where Kerala, for instance, does extremely badly. It's quite shocking. So I would say it's a complex. Looking at aggregates like 5 trillion just distract us from the serious issue, which is that of human development, and to have a population who is free, once again, of hunger and ignorance and disease. I mean, so that's what I would say. Human development, and I come back to saying that I really believe that states are the key. Will we make the will we what's the right word, transit to all these things that the SDG is hoping for? It's possible, but it would really depend on the states, and it would depend on the politics in these states. Let me give you a small example. Maharashtra, which is probably the state which has the highest GDP, is a state which spends the lowest share of GDP on health. And you've seen the results. It has very high death rates. So that is politics. It has nothing to do with capacity. These are rich states. In fact, I just want to conclude by this if you don't have time. Interestingly enough, there is in India, an inverse relation between per capita income of states, which is somewhere a reflection of their wealth, and spending on health as a share of GDP. The richer states in India have on average being spent less on health. So it has nothing to do with capacity. I come back, it has something to do with, not a word everybody likes to hear because they want technical fixes. It has to do with politics. I'm sorry to say there are no technical fixes. It has to come through, India's a democracy, and therefore it will only come through the political process. It is not going to help just because you have some more educated people in all the states. This, what can I say, will to alter the situation as far as human development is concerned in general, and to eliminate hunger in particular, will have to come, can only come through the political process. I can give you examples if you have time, but we can talk about it.
I also want you to quickly touch upon the caste aspect, because caste is also a determinant of nutrition and also of poverty to some extent. So if you could quickly touch upon the caste.
Yeah. So I think this is an important thing, but I just want to say that there are nutritionists. In fact, there's a paper, a media paper by two, one is an economist and one's a health scientist by the name of Uday Shankar Mishra. And the other is Irudaya Rajan, and their paper in the Hindu. You can just Google it and you'll get it. And they make a very important point. Sometimes we mistake the attributes of which caste is one with certain outcomes, and that can be a mistake. And I just want to give you an example. The Kerala economy is hardly in a good shape, but it has very, very good human development indicators. And it's a state which has basically use what I would call a social democratic approach rather than an identity-based approach, whether it is caste or ethno-nationalism or linguistic identity. So it is not necessary to take a caste-based approach to human development. While it is certainly the case that certain castes are deprived and you need to actually focus on them, but that is not going to come about because you have a caste census. Let me finish with an example which will mean a lot to you. The number of women in India has been counted for over a century. One of the shocking developments in India is from 1947 onwards. The ratio of women to men in India has declined in every census. Every census, sorry, not Sensex, Sensex is the stock market. Caste is important, but counting caste by itself can make little difference. And I would say there are examples where across the board improvement has happened without counting caste, and counting attributes, including sex, I don't want to use the word gender, such as women, has made no difference to the women's condition. In fact, women seem to be struggling for their existence, not for their identity. If you look at the sex ratio, which is the number of women by the number of men in society, it's been declining in India for 75 years. So I'll stop with that about attributes, and so I'll stop.
Thank you for sharing those figures. Caste census, I think, is another debate for another time.
Right.
I want to go to Dr. Pentel. Dr. Pentel, we have a question for you from T.R. Singh, who says, do you think we need interventions that directly target discriminatory social norms in response to intergenerational problems such as anemia in women and children? I think a very complex question for that matter. Sorry, sir, you're muted.
If we go into all the complications which our society faces, I think we will only drift along. I may not be liked by many, but I think we should have an Operation Nutrition, and we should figure out where undernutrition, malnutrition is. For example, it's very clear that from 6 months to 3 year child are the most vulnerable. So why can't we have a baby food for them? We can have all kind of packaged food for everybody in the country, and people are buying them left and right, ordering them online and whatnot. When it comes to children from the poverty-stricken families, we go into a very complex discussion on how many things have to improve that their lives will improve. If we are serious about it, I think we should not be bothered about the means by which we achieve it. We should say that certain protein requirements, certain micronutrient requirements must be met. And I think there is enough knowledge in the world of food, how to prepare baby food, for example, which can be very useful for these small children and make sure that they don't get into, and that is for everybody, that goes beyond caste, that goes beyond the status. It could be part of the PDS. So I think we are we are making the things too complex if we are going to wait for, of course, political decisions are very important. Whether to use technology or not is also going to be a political decision. But if there is enough political courage and we are not too much bogged down by the means by which we supply this nutrition, I think we can have interventions which will be very successful and can bring out this particularly vulnerable 6 months to 3 year bracket of children out of whole lives, in a way, decreasing their mental status, not taking care of their after adolescent health. I think the crisis is there, but to meet it, we should be more focused on how to defeat it rather than worried about the means. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pentel. We do have another question for you, and that is, which crop do you recommend to the farmers to produce, which is also financially beneficial to them, to the producers, and could also result in maybe reducing the hunger issue?
Not any particular crop. You have to have a mixed bag of crops. You should have the farmer the possibility and the opportunity to grow 2 or 3 alternate crops in the field. Today, they are stuck with only one crop. In the drought-prone areas, they are stuck with coarse cereals or nutri-cereals. In the irrigated areas, we are pumping out millions of liters of groundwater and creating a desperate situation for the country for the future by growing rice and wheat. And I think this is probably going to be the biggest ecological crisis that's going to be that's looming large on us. But we are complacent there again. And we need research intensification, we need technological solutions. That is what I have to say on all these things.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Neena, we have a question for you from Suneet Madhur, who says, why do we have so many problems with GHI, though GHI is common for every country and others are making progress on the same indicators? So I think something that you've already talked about, but if you could perhaps revisit, why do you have so many problems with GHI? Why does the community has so many problems with GHI?
The problem with GHI is that, like I said, it is not necessarily, the indicators that they have chosen are not representing hunger alone, and at the same time, there is an overrepresentation of children under 5, which is only 1/6 of the total population, and also multiple counts. So these are certain problems, and in certain indexes are created with by certain NGOs, and we don't want to get into that. We are not denying that we need to look at nutrition, we need to address the nutrition, and every country, India, like I said, if we will look at only average one value, for the country and all, being such a large country, we are having so much variation. Yes, certain areas need more focus. So we have an aspirational district program within the government of India. Niti Aayog is trying to focus on those districts that really require. We also work in high burden districts for various diseases, have special emphasis on those. There are pockets where there are good examples. We are trying to promote diversified diets, include cereals, have better nutrition. And I would not agree more with Dr. Pentel about having Operation Nutrition, which is what I would say is, like, in a way, Poshan Abhiyan is what is it trying to bring out. So yes, other countries are doing that ranking itself is not comparable even according to GHI team itself. So we should not worry about rankings. We should not worry. What we are saying, we should not worry so much about what GHI is saying. We should look at our own situation. We are trying to do things that need to be done, and we need to intensify our efforts in certain areas. There is no denying of that. And at the same time, though, hunger problem has been there, but we also have to understand that our crop production over the years has increased. Not only, of course, initially, thanks to our scientists, agricultural scientists, it was initially in wheat and rice, but now even other crops, oil seeds and all, we have really improved. We, in fact, are the second largest producer of fruits, and there are other economic and other issues that we talked about to, make sure that people can consume those diversified diets and things. So we should look at our own situation. What are the problems that are confronting us, and what are the solutions, and how we have to reach our targets, rather than worry too much about what XYZ is telling us, because there is no denying we have to focus, but at the same time, we should not get into a certain we should not get digressed by, I would say, one particular index produced by somebody. So that is our problem with GHI. We do not agree with, and it is a consensus in the scientific community. There have been I've attended a lot of meetings with National Agricultural, NAS, with ICMR, with various groups in the nutrition, and there is almost everybody agrees on these aspects. So what I'm talking is totally based on what the scientific nutrition community feels in the country about this index. We should not worry so much about it. We should look at the task at hand, and we should really focus with the way, what are the specific problems to India, and how we have to address. And I think we have that capacity, we have that scientific knowledge within the country, and we should come together and, try to solve this problem.
All right, concluding this debate now, let's get the panel speaking again. 1 minute each, please. I have quick few questions. Snigdha, starting from you. As the CEO of Action Against Hunger, where do you see the progress areas are for the government at this point in time? Where do we need to make immediate progress?
I think, post-COVID, the rebuilding, and it's going to be, we were, let's say we were already somewhere where we were quite stuck, and now wherever we were, we've gone below that. So rebuilding is going to be my first, not that I can advise, but would be my first priority. And the only way that I would say that anybody, not only government, that it applies to me, that applies to all of us, can happen if we're more open to collaborations, and just join hands and let whoever is best at doing whatever, people start doing it, rather than, as Dr. Balakrishnan was also saying, don't politicize it. Right now is not that time. Right now it's a time to just get the bricks and mortar and rebuild. Yeah.
Dr. Pulapre, I'm not sure what politicizing, by the way, is. If holding government to account is politicizing, I'm okay with that. But from the point of view of a journalist, I think, as I said, criticism is important. And if any party in power, and regardless of who is in the opposition, criticizes the ruling government, I think that helps in the larger interest of this nation. Dr. Pulapre, public spending is not enough, as you said earlier. Is that going to be the next big thing, or should be the next big thing for the government in its line of action? I also want you to quickly talk about the rising fuel and petrol and diesel prices. Rising fuel prices have buried a hole in the pockets of consumers and perhaps also hurt Indians where it hurts the most. People who drive trolleys, tractors, trucks. If the prices continue to rise, how will the poorest of poor actually be able to sustain? How will they commute? How does that impact people? So you're muted.
Give me a sec. I'm also an external speaker, so I need to. Yeah, it's. You can hear me, right? Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Shweta. I'm sorry. Give me a sec. Give me a minute. I'm so sorry.
Can you hear me, sir? Am I audible?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks. All right. So I just want to say that I'm sorry, I probably didn't communicate myself very well. I have no problem with politicization whatsoever. In fact, that's what I said. I said politics will make the difference. I may have, sorry, not made myself clear. And I do say the
sorry, sir. So that was a takeaway from what Snigdha said. So I was.
I'm not by any means. Chastising what my colleague said. She's perfectly, has a right to say what she wants. But I didn't mean that. I just wish to say, in fact, the differing human development levels in India, differing levels of infant mortality and hunger, if you wish, is a function of politics. The political situation in states. I mean, what is driving these states and the social structure, etc. Now, so I think it's right, and it's perfectly right to be critical of the government. I've just written an article today called The Debacle of Demonetization. You cannot be more critical or political than that. But anyway, so what should we do? And I'm not really going to bother very much about the petrol prices thing, because, we really know what the issue there. But I want to focus on the much more important thing that you asked, what the next move of the government is now, whether in the center or the states. What we should aim at is to build a valuable economy. I'm talking, when I say the valuable economy, an economy that is of value to us, which it could be completely unrelated to the level, to the market valuation, whether it is 3 million or 3 trillion or 5 trillion or 4 trillion. A $5 trillion dollar economy might still not have any of the things that we really need, which is, once again, health facilities, schooling, early child interventions. That is what we really need to do, and that is what we should focus on. Now we have a great opportunity, but I come back to a theme which I really harped on right through this presentation or this panel discussion. while the center certainly has not done some of the things that it could have done as far as the response to COVID is concerned, notably a macroeconomic stimulus. India has the lowest in the world by far. The states are the states are going to be hugely important in what sort of lives we lead in India. As it is, the levels of poverty vary very significantly in the country. We've reached a situation I don't think India can be fully governed but from the center. But the general focus, whether at the center or at the states, is that we should be building a valuable economy, an economy which actually provides us the things that we really need, food at an affordable price, health facilities, education. And I just wish to say something that I haven't really spoken about, which I should have. Maybe I have focused a little excessively on the demand side, capability to purchase, but I think there's a serious issue on the supply side in India. And if I may pick up on something that Dr. Penthal raised, productivity. Productivity is something which will stand in the way, which will prevent the price of food rising. As the price of food rises, access to food fails. You must remember that. Productivity is in some ways win-win because it can help farmers to get higher incomes and it ensures that people also have access to food. Unfortunately, productivity is not talked about sufficiently, and the ecological undertow, if I might use the word, that we are facing is something which we are not giving any attention to, and that could really threaten food security in the future. So there is also a supply side problem which needs to be addressed. Thank you. I haven't answered your question about petrol, Shweta, but I don't
That's
think
fine, sir. I think it's another debate for another day again.
Right. Thank you for
and
your
PM cares, of course, is also a big debate, which I think is an important topic for argumentative Indians to take up next time onward. Dr. Deepak Penthal, something important that Dr. Pulapure pointed out. He said it's not just the supply, it's not just the demand, but also the supply. How do we meet this supply, sir?
Well, there is no reason why we cannot produce more on lesser area. In fact, a lot of drought-prone areas should move to more perennial type of crops or maybe tree species and so on to protect the environment. But then you have to have intensification and sustainable intensification, which is a very well worked out area, but that requires, again, research and development interventions, which we have not done to the extent we should have done. That's the one point I would like to make. The second point I would like to make is, are we really concerned about the physical well-being of India's children? If we are, then I think we should not worry about the means. We should, that only this way we should deliver. If there are large-scale industrial solutions available, we should go for it and make sure that, because I am hearing this debate for the last so many years, and the situation is not really improving. It might have improved in terms of percentage, but actual numbers, because the population is expanding, is quite constant. So if we are really serious about it, I think that we should not leave any stone unturned to resolve this problem. And the best solutions and most economical solutions should be, which have the maximum benefit, should be taken into consideration and implemented.
Sure, sir. Dr. Neena, perhaps concluding the debate with you, you talked about how layered this problem is, that this is not just about people going to sleep hungry. It's about malnutrition, it's about stunting, it's about wasting, and various other factors that result in perhaps, which are basically not helping Indians to grow to their fullest potential, especially the poorest of poor. How do we counter this problem? you said that enough is being done on the government side. What more can be done from us, the people? Where does the accountability lie?
Yeah, so like I said, we have to really empower the families, to really to make sure that the right, care and things take place. So whether it is governments, whether it is civil society organization, academia, we all need to really support, because the best form of care is definitely going to happen, particularly for the very small children within the families. We believe that, and it is the 0 to 3 year children. If we really take care of the 1,000 days that we talk about, and starting from, I would say, a little in the portion 2, we are saying a little beyond 1,000 days. We start from preconception to the taking care of the mother while she is pregnant, making sure that she gets all the services that are meant for her, because many times they are not, I mean, the schemes and the provisions might be there are, like, again, in nutrition, both demand and the supply side issues. But as a civil society, if we will increase the demand, if we will make sure that we use the services, we are accessing the things that are there, that itself will be a feedback loop to the government to really improve the services, and also plug the gaps on the supply side. And it is not, I would say, it is not government or the people, it is we, the Indians, all of us, who have to work together. So, I mean, I think this was a very well coordinated debate, in the sense that all the panelists in some way have highlighted, many things that we all agree on, rather than we disagree on, though we bring in our own perspectives and different aspects. But yes, we need partnerships, we need collaborations, we need technology, we need to, increase public spending. I think COVID has highlighted the need to increase public spending on health, and we need to strengthen our infrastructure. And most importantly, we have to have a doubt-free approach that we have to achieve the targets together.
A panel that agrees with itself or with each other makes the life of the journalist more complicated, because I will never get to hear the countering views, or perhaps the public will not get to.
No, I don't think we were not countering. We were bringing different aspects of the problem.
That's right.
I think we countered. we did counter enough.
But I'm happy that we all agree on some very basic issues. That is, GHI may not be the correct indicator of where India is at the moment, but the problem is severe, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. India has experienced a very strong impact of COVID-19 pandemic, halting, in fact, many of our brilliant schemes, the ASHA workers, the caregivers, the midday meals, etc. And this can only be reversed. At this point in time, India has achieved a substantial growth as far as the entire jabbing of the country is concerned. Most of us have got our jabs. Most of us have got our COVID-19 vaccination done. And I think from here on, what we'll see the government doing is going to pave the way for the growth of the country and perhaps help in eradicating hunger as a problem. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It's been a brilliant debate, brilliant panel. I think you didn't completely disagree with each other, but yes, there was a diversity of views and opinion, and I think that helps build a better country, a better democracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. It was really enriching, really lovely.
Thank you.
I would just say we should not say the problem is severe, but the problem is at hand and we are on the job.
It is very severe, Dr. Neena.
Government, I have to say that.